Welcome. Today, we're diving straight into this explainer to uncover the 8 foundational characteristics that make a successful teacher. Whether you're stepping into a classroom for the very first time or you're a seasoned veteran looking to kind of fine tune your craft, mastering these core traits is absolutely the secret to a thriving classroom. We're drawing from some really fantastic insights from the American Board today, and we're going to break down exactly what separates a pretty good educator from a truly great one. Now, take a look at this quote. What's really fascinating here is how it frames teaching not just as a job, but as a deeply refined craft. It tells us novices really have to learn to observe and absorb the wisdom of veteran educators. If you're a beginning teacher, you can't just go in and reinvent the wheel, right? You've got to humble yourself, seek out mentors, and tap into that living library. And remember, veterans didn't just magically wake up with this knowledge. They built this library through years of trial, error, and some pretty intense refinement. They survived those really difficult first days, and their minds are now packed with real, time-tested answers to the absolute toughest classroom challenges. So here's our agenda for today. First, we'll look at the foundation. Second, managing the environment. Third, mastering the craft. Fourth, behind-the-scenes habits. And finally, the lifelong learner. Let's get to it. Starting off with Section 1, managing the classroom environment, setting the stage for learning. So our very first characteristic is maintaining class control. Obviously, successful teachers anticipate disruptions before they even happen. But when they do inevitably happen, how do you handle them? Well, there are 2 totally distinct philosophies here. You can view discipline as a product. Think of a principal who strictly confiscated iPods from female athletes just because, quote, a rule is a rule, completely ignoring the fact that they'd literally never been in trouble before. Or on the flip side, you can view discipline as a process. This is like another principal who actually personalized attention time based on a student's past history. The absolute most effective teachers blend these, but they lean heavily into the process. And why does that matter? Because enforcing boundaries fairly while focusing on a personalized process just yields much better long-term results. It actually helps students internalize behavioral changes and grow, rather than you just blindly swinging the rulebook and hoping for the best. Now, moving to our second characteristic, maintaining clear and high expectations. The crucial point here is that setting expectations is literally a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you expect a whole lot, students are going to stretch to meet it. But what happens when we don't do this? Well, holding students to low expectations is actually a severe form of discrimination. Deciding that a specific child, or maybe a subgroup, just can't achieve at a high level, and then lowering the bar so they don't get quote-unquote embarrassed, that actively strips them of their potential. And students are incredibly perceptive. They know exactly when the bar has been lowered for them, and it completely shatters their internal motivation. Conversely, if you keep that bar high, students will almost invariably perform up to the level expected of them. To put that into perspective, consider this summer program where students were engineering maglev vehicles. In week 1, they were given a pretty generous time limit, several days to build a vehicle that could race in under 5.5 seconds. Well, they absolutely crushed it in just 1 day. So the coordinators raised the requirements and significantly shortened the time frame for the next group. Guess what? They exceeded that too. By week 3, the bar was raised even higher, and the students just kept right on overperforming. The takeaway here, when you consistently challenge your students, they are going to consistently surprise you. Moving on to Section 2, mastering the teaching craft, the what and the how. Let's look at characteristic number 3, providing deliberate instruction. A well-structured classroom has a very clear agenda and a clear objective. Students know exactly what to do, and they have full teacher support. On the flip side, without that deliberate instruction, a classroom rapidly spirals into a totally unstructured environment. Students simply lack the maturity to teach themselves without a solid framework, and that causes distracting noise, discipline issues, and incredibly low accomplishment. Deliberate instruction isn't about bossing kids around, right? It's really about providing a psychological safety net. When students know exactly what success looks like on any given day, they feel secure enough to actually take academic risks. That brings us to characteristic 4, exhibiting content expertise. Whether it's a college-trained teacher with incredibly deep factual knowledge, or maybe a second career teacher bringing real-world stories from their past professions, content expertise is vital. It's what allows educators to break down the highly complex into the easily understandable. Think of that veteran chemistry teacher with the completely memorized periodic table, effortlessly answering the most obscure questions. To his students, he seems like an absolute genius. But really, it's the result of deeply internalizing the content over years. And this deep reserve of knowledge is what allows a great teacher to pivot their explanation on the fly, the exact second a student gets confused, seamlessly cross-linking concepts without missing a single beat. But, just knowing the content isn't quite enough. This brings us to a really critical concept, which is our fifth characteristic: mastering teaching techniques, or pedagogy. Pedagogy is basically the art of teaching. It's the how. You could literally be the smartest person in the room, but if you don't know how to express that knowledge in a way that students can actually understand and retain, you just won't succeed. You might have the what, the content, but pedagogy is the essential vehicle that transports that content directly into the student's mind. Successful teachers master various pedagogical techniques to hit different learning modalities, because we know not every child learns by reading, right? Some really need to listen, and others absolutely need hands-on doing. But mastering these techniques also means paying close attention to how students process challenges. Great teachers are constantly adjusting their instruction levels by reading these modalities in real time. For instance, novice teachers often make the mistake of making their very first quiz way too difficult and demanding, which just completely demoralizes their students. But by reading the room and refining their techniques, successful teachers adjust the cognitive load. They dial in the difficulty to perfectly challenge students without breaking their confidence. Now for Section 3, Essential Behind-the-Scenes Habits, Organization and Records. Let's talk about Characteristic 6, Organization. Now, we've all probably heard the legend of that eccentric teacher who could magically pull a single graded paper out of a floor-to-ceiling stack of clutter. But in the real world, disorganization just wastes valuable time and incredible instructional opportunities. Real success requires organized, flexible lesson plans. Keeping a sequenced curriculum on a USB drive, a cloud service, or even a dedicated 3-ring binder prevents superficial teaching and endless stress. And here is why this matters so much. True organization actually creates freedom. Think about it. When you aren't scrambling to find papers or figure out what comes next, you have the mental bandwidth to be spontaneous, to easily adapt a lesson, or to insert a dynamic activity right on the fly. Maintaining current and accurate records is far, far more than just bureaucratic busywork. This is our 7th characteristic. Consider attendance, for example. These records can literally be subpoenaed as court evidence to place a student at a specific location. Tracking exactly who left for the lavatory and when is absolutely vital for safety and investigating any hallway incidents. Grades, they require transparent documentation for parent review, and discipline logs are essential for escalating consequences appropriately and identifying when a student might need a much broader support intervention. Bottom line, accurate records protect the teacher, the school, and ultimately the student. Finally, Section 4, the lifelong learner, continual professional growth. To stay dynamic, successful teachers lean heavily into our 8th and final characteristic, continuing to learn. By joining professional organizations like ASCD or subject-specific groups like the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, educators bring fresh, new energy back to their classrooms. They attend conventions, they serve on committees, and they form local learning communities. And you know what's funny? Often teachers find that the absolute best new classroom strategy doesn't even come from a fancy top-down theoretical keynote speech. It comes from a simple, informal hallway conversation. That shared, practical troubleshooting with peers who are right there in the trenches with you is incredibly powerful. A teacher who continues to learn injects massive energy into their practice and acts as a model of lifelong curiosity for their students. So as we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to think about the educators who shaped your own life. If you lined up the absolute best teachers you've ever had, which of these 8 qualities would they share? I challenge you to look at your own professional conduct today. Start building your own list of these core characteristics. Constantly look to refine your craft and ask yourself, what kind of legacy do you want to leave in the classroom? Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep learning.